'Cause right now, what I need is a miracle, and I'm not sure it can happen to me. 'Cause right now, what I need is a miracle.
Hey, Thrive friends. You know, Jesus definitely would not have been good at social distancing in a pandemic. I mean, the story of Jesus is the story of a man who was with people. He was with people in large groups. He was with people in small groups. Jesus was frequently touched by people, and he touched people. And many of Jesus's miracles involved Jesus touching somebody. And the one we're going to look at tonight in Mark chapter 1 involves close proximity and even physical contact between Jesus and the man we now know as the former leper. This story breaks all the coronavirus rules. After a year of limited contact and social distancing, this is a perfect time for us to look at some of the socially undistanced miracles of Jesus. Tonight, we're in Mark 1, verse 40. Now, desperation is the starting place for understanding miracles. Desperation. Jessica LaGrone is a preacher and an author, and in her study of miracles, she noticed a pattern that before every miracle in the Gospels, there is desperation. Preceding every miracle, someone is desperate. Another way to put it is that when you're at the end of your rope, you're not at the end of your hope. Desperation is not a dead end. And that's what we see in Mark 1, this encounter between Jesus and a man with leprosy. A man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. "If you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean," he said. Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. "I am willing, be healed." And instantly the leprosy disappeared and the man was healed. Now, friends, don't miss these 5 details about Jesus' willing ability to engage with our desperation. The first is this: I am as desperate as this leper. I am as desperate as this leper. The leper's desperation was physical, social, and spiritual. Can you relate to how he must have felt? Hopeless, helpless, powerless, contaminated, quarantined, shamed, vulnerable, unworthy, unclean, isolated, untouchable, avoidable, invisible. Sounds like a list of things that we have felt and experienced over the course of the past year. I mean, we've got our own desperation. How would you fill in this blank? I feel desperate about blank. What do you feel desperate about tonight? That the willing ability of Jesus could make a difference in. I feel desperate about blank. Desperation is what Jesus was talking about that time that he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Or as the Message says it, you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope, because with less of you, there's more room for God and his rule. That's Matthew 5:3. Friends, here's the deal. Until we're honest with Jesus and honest with ourselves about our desperation, we'll never know him like we want to know him, and we'll never experience all that he desires to give to us. Until we're honest with Jesus and ourselves about our desperation. So what makes you feel hopeless, invisible, isolated, like this leper? Own your desperation. Own your desperation. A second detail not to miss is this, and I believe this with all my heart, that when desperation meets Jesus, a miracle always happens. When desperation meets Jesus, a miracle always happens. You see, Jesus is as willing as he is able, and he is as able as he is willing. The word for it is compassion. Compassion is real help from a place of deep care, and that's what our desperation finds in Jesus. E. Stanley Jones was a Methodist evangelist and missionary last century, and he has a quote that says, "We do not have to overcome God's reluctance. We have only to grasp God's highest willingness." You see, there's nothing about God that's reluctant to help us. Hear that. There's nothing about God that's reluctant to help us. God is able and willing, and we see that in the life of Jesus. Now, to say that Jesus is willing is not a passive go along with whatever kind of willingness. To say that Jesus is willing, it's an active willingness. It is Jesus willing God's goodness into our experience. It is Jesus willing into being God's good intentions for us. Honest desperation opens the door into your life, and Jesus walks in and goes to work with his willing and ableness, and miraculous happens. A third detail not to miss is that the miracle sometimes solves the situation, and the miracle always strengthens and soothes despair. There are two general ways that we experience a miracle. There's the miracle of a problem solved or a problem being solved, and we love it when that happens. But there's also the miracle of the presence of Jesus in the midst of a not yet solved problem. The miracle of the presence of Jesus in the midst of a not yet solved problem. Hey, let's imagine an alternate ending. Imagine an alternate ending to the healing story in Mark 1. Even if the touch of Jesus had not healed the leper physically, I believe it would have healed him emotionally and socially and spiritually. And I'm not so sure but what those would be the greater miracles, to be healed emotionally, socially, spiritually. A fourth detail not to miss in this story is that Jesus is more contagious than the leper. Jesus' holy wholeness is more contagious than the man's leprosy. Notice what happened when Jesus touches the leper. Jesus didn't contract leprosy. The leper caught Jesus' wholeness. And when Jesus reaches in and touches your desperation, Jesus doesn't suddenly feel desperate. Instead, you feel his compassion. You feel his ability. You feel his willingness. Now, one last, fifth detail that emerges from this story, and this applies to all the other socially undistanced miracles we're going to look at in the next few weeks. It is the miracle of Jesus' transcendence and immanence, because a miracle is this coming together of the transcendence of God and the immanence of God in Jesus. Now, transcendence is a theological term that means that God is other than, higher than, different from, on a whole different level. Transcendence. And transcendence means that Jesus is omnipotent and eternal and strong and able. Transcendence. The other word is immanence. Immanence is a theological term that means that God is near, close, familiar, accessible. Immanence means that Jesus is in touch with your desperation, that Jesus is willing to help and compassionate. And the miracle of Jesus' socially undistanced touch and presence brings together these two, transcendence and immanence. Don't miss the miracle. Don't miss these miracles of Jesus' transcendence and immanence. So what now? What do we do with this? Let me leave you with these three things. Follow the pattern of the guy that we know as the former leper. 1, own your desperation. Be honest. Be vulnerable. Naming it doesn't make you any more vulnerable. Naming it just makes you honest. Own your desperation. 2, remember these two key words: humble and bold. That's the way the leper came to Jesus, humble and bold. And third, reach out. Reach out from your place of desperation to the one who is able and willing, who is reaching out and even touching you.
'Cause right now,